Hello and welcome to the Entertainment Biz Show presented by Vouch. I'm your host, Justin Jacobson. Just as a reminder, nothing here is intended as legal advice. It is for educational purposes only. Special thanks to our sponsor, Vouch. Vouch is a digital gig marketplace where talent and businesses can hire other pre-approved individuals to streamline talent searches, where industry dot connectors earn by making talent referrals. Visit vouch-app.com to learn more about the world's first social utility network where it truly pays to know people. Hashtag ad. So this week's guest is Eric McLellan. Eric is a noted A&R and the owner of music consulting agency Peep This. Eric previously worked for the WWE, Warner Music Group, Universal Music Group, and Sony BMG, among many others. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Justin. Appreciate it, man.
My pleasure. So to start, tell us about your previous work in the entertainment space. How'd you first get involved?
Yeah, I was really lucky. I just was a business major really in college. Played baseball my whole life and got recruited at Monmouth and Wagner. Wagner in New York, Monmouth in Jersey. I was talking to Seton Hall as well, but didn't think I would be able to get on there on the team. It's a pretty competitive. They're all D1, but they're pretty high level. So went to Monmouth, and probably 2 years in, end of my sophomore year, I find out there's a music industry program, and I start looking into it, and I realized that a big prerequisite is you have to sing and play an instrument, neither of which I can do. So I had all these core business courses starting to align, the boring stuff, right? Like economics and macroeconomics, those kind of things. But I wanted these music industry courses. So there was like jazz and American culture, blues to rap, the history of rock and roll. So I look into it, and through the humanities department, if you have a certain grade point average, you can basically make your own major. And I was really lucky. I was able to take my business courses and then my music industry courses and combine them. And the prerequisite was that you had to have obviously a certain grade point average, like I said, but you also had to meet with a counselor from each discipline and then do a 30-page thesis. So it was cool.
So they really put you through the through the grinder.
They did, yeah. And like I had a business law guy for my business side, which, as you know, as a lawyer, right, is really important in the entertainment industry. So I figured that should be a good foundation. And then my music industry courses, I was really lucky. There was a guy named Ron Frangipani who was John Lennon's arranger. He produced for Janis Ian. I believe he played on Jeremiah Was a Bullfrog. He co-wrote Sugar Sugar Honey Honey by the Archies. So he taught all the music industry courses, and he was really like our first mentor, like mine especially. Like he really painted an amazing picture of the music industry. And then I got lucky. Like I took an industry seminar course, which is basically our like internships. And it was stressful because I actually didn't have an internship going into the class. And in college, you had to pay for the class, right? For your credits and stuff. So I'm sitting there, I'm paying the money. I got nothing. Like 3, 4 weeks in, I'm talking to the guy, Ron. I'm like, hey, should I drop this course? Like, there's nothing happening here. And he's like, no, stick it out, stick it out. It's all about networking. Maybe your peers will know someone or you can get a referral. So I'm holding out. And then all of a sudden, the craziest thing happened. My aunt, my godmother, my aunt, she was teaching at like a YMCA, like after school stuff, like watching kids. And there was this guy who every couple of days, weeks, there was like random people picking up his child. So she's always like checking to make sure it was okay to release the child and stuff. And one day she finally meets her dad, and he comes through and he's like, hey, thank you so much. You've been doing great looking out for my daughter. He's like, here's my card, my cell, my email, my beeper at the time, is on here. If you need me, just hit me here. She looks at the card and it says Universal Motown Records. And she's like, oh my God, my nephew is looking for an internship. And he's like, well, you know what? Like, that's my email. I'll have him send the resume. He's like, you looked out for my daughter. I'm going to look out for him. And his name was James Eichelberger. And he ended up signing Kaya, My Neck, My Back. He brought that record in. So he brought me into Universal Motown. I worked with this guy, Bruce Carbone, who was the head of A&R at Universal Motown. And that was my start. I did that for like a year and a half interning. So it was pretty amazing.
Amazing. So what's kind of like going to some of the places you kind of worked and kind of leading into what you're doing now? So what are some of the other places you've kind of worked in the industry?
Yeah, so I was lucky after that internship. A lot of people I talked to would tell me that wasn't really an internship. It was really like a first job. I was on the executive level at Universal Motown in the head of A&R's office. So I tried to get a job there desperately, but there were no openings in the A&R department. So I graduate college. That summer, I remember like it was hard to find a gig. Um, I think it was like probably mid to late September. I linked up with a temp agency, which is really important just for context. Like they can actually help you like get in the door of a lot of platforms and places. A lot of times it's almost like a substitute teacher. Like it feels like you fill in for someone on
Yeah,
vacation.
like they're on maternity leave and they need someone for 4 months.
Yeah, so it's a chance to really get in like this little network and then they plug you in. They call you up. They're like, "Hey, we have an availability today." Usually like that Sunday, you'll let them know like I'm good the whole week or I can only work Wednesday, and they'll keep you on your radar. And then they contact you and if there's a fit, you go in. And I had that at Sony. So I basically was in like the finance department, um, digital. I remember I was in all these different departments. So it was kind of like a paid internship in a way because it was cool. I got to check out all these other departments, meet different people. And then I ended up in advertising and I was filling in for someone that was on vacation. And similarly, like probably like day two, someone in the department like kind of pulls me aside and they're like, "We really like you." They're like, "We don't know what's going to happen." She sort of like took off to figure out what's going on. If she comes back and says, "I'm going to leave, we would love to consider you. Are you open for this?" And I was like, absolutely. So had a great 2 weeks. The people were awesome, amazing. And then sure enough, I get the call probably a couple days later after it ended. And they were like, "Hey, she didn't come back. Can you come in?" So that was in marketing and advertising. And I did that for about 2 years. It was an in-house agency inside of Sony Music called Gotham Advertising. But we did like billboards, bus shelters, out of home. My role was basically like the entertainment weeklies, like those magazines, like kind of booking little ads in there, like David Guetta is coming through and playing Stone Pony or something like that. And one of the cool parts of it was I was interfacing with a lot of like editors and magazine people, and I met the founders of Vice, and I also met oh, I'm blanking on the thing now, but it was like this big hip hop magazine where it talked about samples and stuff. And some of the founders ended up going on to work at like Warner Music Group and stuff. And, I really got to like follow their career just as mine was taking off too and built those lasting kind of friendships and relationships there. So, did that for about 2 years. And then the department, our boss started it 30 years prior and she was retiring. So like my second year into the gig, she became a consultant. And when that consultancy ended, basically everyone in our department except the digital person was getting laid off. So I was lucky. I some people inside of the creative services department, that's who we answered to, looked out, and this woman Betty Cordes, and she worked for the head guy Adam Owett, and she recommended me for a video production job. So I was like 2 or 3 years in now, and I was like seeing my friends working in finance and making good money, and I was kind of like, man, I have
Working
this
for
A&R
concert
dream.
tickets
Yeah,
and
at least I
music.
get the concert tickets, but they were, buying condos and stuff like that, living in Hoboken, spending money and stuff, and I'm still living at home with my parents, saving money and stuff. And yeah, I just sort of see this lane where, all right, I want to do A&R, but it's taking a while to get into it. Video production, I grew up on like MTV. I'm very visual. I can draw and paint. I can't sing or play an instrument. So I said to myself, all right, I'm going to focus on video production. That could be really cool. And it was. I worked on a couple of Alicia Keys videos. I worked on like $750,000 videos, and they eventually started dropping to like 30,000. So there was some like hesitation and some writing on the wall that I saw, oh man, like there could be a layoff here. But I took the job because it's the single to all the songs. And through that, I met a lot of A&R people. And that's how I kind of like, every project, I talked to the A&R, we'd get the track, we'd put it in the video, sync it up and stuff. And after that, I'd kind of say like, "Hey, I want to get into A&R. How'd you get your start?" And they were very cool and open, and they'd be like, "Come through the office, let's chat." One would refer me to the next. And I was able to sort of find my way over to this woman who was at Warner Music Group, working at Sire Records. She was Michael Goldstone's coordinator for Seymour Stein and Michael Goldstone, and I think that was it. It was a small team in New York. They were part of Warner Brothers Records. So I interviewed with her, went great, And she's like, Goldie's out of town. When he comes back, would love to connect you guys, and we'll go through the final round. So I'm waiting and waiting, and all of a sudden I see in Billboard, Michael Goldstone leaves Sire Records to start his own thing, Mom and Pop Records. And I'm like, man, like I was so close. I really felt like I was going to get the gig. And now what? But then I start looking at it and analyzing the department and the situation, right? And I'm thinking about it. My friend Bree is gone. Goldie leaves. So I ask her, I'm like, well, what about Goldie at Mom and Pop? Like, does he have, anyone? She's like, oh no, he took our actual intern who's now going to be his assistant. So I'm like, great. So then I'm like, well, wait a minute. What about Seymour Stein? Like, everyone left. Like, who's there with Seymour? So I actually emailed Seymour and said, I was interviewing to work with Michael Goldstone, Goldie, and I know Bree and all this stuff. And he calls me and he says, "Can you start in 2 weeks? You could be my scout." And yeah, I became his A&R scout, and it was the best 11 years of my life.
Wow. Right. It's like right place, right time. But I think the perseverance of doing whatever you can to be there, right? I think
Yeah.
that's the biggest message. And I think, for everyone out there that's trying to understand this trajectory, and, I try to explain it to the students, to anyone that's like, this is not easy. And like you said, like living at home while everyone is going on their path and really doing all this stuff, and they're like similarly situated to you, but it's like, that what comes with the glamour and the sexiness of the sports, the music, the TV, like Fashion Week, Super Bowl, Grammys. Like, this is what it comes with, the
Yeah.
hard dedication, but putting yourself out there and then striking when opportunity presents itself, right? It's all of these things. And I think that kind of is a perfect segue to kind of, what you're working on now. And kind of like talk about kind of, founding Yo Peep This, and kind of, the initial vision and why you launched it.
Yeah, definitely. So I had always been sometimes too early for my own good inside of like Warner on the A&R side. Like Gallant was in my office multiple times when he was still at NYU. I found the Lumineers, brought it into an A&R meeting. They didn't think Ho Hey was a hit record. Um, Pretty early on Billie Eilish, I think Interscope was in, but was talking to management, and we definitely had a conversation around it that there was potential. Ex Ambassadors I had very early, so I've always been early, and I wanted to find something where I could like continue on to develop artists, and then a lot of it came out of, I guess, necessity as well. I was when I left Warner, I was the department kind of fizzled, I would say. Like Seymour abruptly retired. We found out later he wasn't doing too well and stuff health wise. But at the time we didn't know. And Max Lasauto was actually trying to move me into an international A&R role. So that would have been amazing because I've signed, an Estonian band that won the equivalent of like a Grammy. I had Ryan Hadlock, who produced the Lumineers, make their record. It was an awesome record. I imported this girl, Monica Heldal, from Norway to ADA and Warner, who won like, it's called like a Rookie of the Year, but it's the equivalent of like a Grammy out in Norway. So always been, involved in the international scene. My last band that I A&R'd was this band, the Lottery Winners, who are still doing really well out of the UK. They're on Modern Sky and Virgin. And they charted like top 25. That was the last record I A&R'd. So Max was trying to move me into an international A&R role, and I was in Finland and actually got the call that my contract wasn't getting renewed. So kind of a bummer. I came home a day or too early, and luckily, I had an opportunity with the WWE, so I took that. Um, Felt a little out of necessity. It wasn't like something that I was really like gunning for, but I was like, hey, this could be cool. I was promised I was actually going to A&R entrance themes to the wrestlers. So
Okay.
it's like that would be fun. I was, a wrestling fan when I was a kid
Yeah, I
and
mean,
stuff.
that WWE hip hop album was amazing.
Yeah, yeah. So jumped into that, and then simultaneously I was managing a couple of acts. And
Mhm.
when I got into the WWE, it was cool, but I quickly saw that I felt like my role wasn't really needed. The person that I replaced, I think it was like a year before they actually hired someone. So a lot of the people in their roles were pretty autonomous. So to like supervise them was like kind of weird to me because I felt like I was definitely senior, and I was navigating the space, but they all knew what they were doing. So it was like trying to balance that, right? Of like being almost like an equal and finding my way in the department, but then also managing them. So it was a little weird. But the job was cool. Like I was on the ground at WrestleMania 35 at MetLife, which was amazing. Like hung out with Joan Jett. She played Ronda Rousey out to the ring. And just to see like the sheer, it's literally a concert on steroids. I mean, like no pun intended. Like the way they manage like um hair, makeup, right, talent, the food, the live show, coordinating all that. Even like the reality show aspect of it is like going on as all this other stuff is happening. So it was really a cool moment, and it was at MetLife in Jersey, so it was like unbelievable. It was right in my backyard. So that was fun. But while I was there, I was managing a couple of artists, and three of them got signed. So I said to myself, wow, if I was ever gonna like jump off and do it on my own in the business, because a lot of it is like the independent space, right? Even majors, they always like kind of cherry pick from the indies, and the indies always kind of start the trends. So it was all just kind of aligning, and I stayed on for a year. I got my bonus at the WWE, and then jumped off, and not knowing,
Sorry,
like,
Vince,
yeah, yeah, it
but
was all good.
thanks.
Yeah, not knowing though that it was going into the pandemic year. So that was probably the most challenging thing. So two of my bands, their records did come out. And then one of the acts, she was signed with the guy who produced and wrote Call Me Maybe by Carly Rae Jepsen. And she wanted to kind of do her artist thing. And he was great. He just wanted to be more like studio focused and radio focused. So there wasn't really a clash, but it was just like two different meetings of the mind. So was able to get her out of her deal, and had the other two. They weren't able to tour, but we put records out. And then out of that, it was just sort of like this brainchild of like developing artists, artist management, and then also like a lot of artist coaching. Because I felt like while I was managing artists, there's a bit of a disconnect there as well, where bands aren't really making a lot of money. So like, as an
Yeah,
A&R, as an
you're
artist
making even
manager,
less money.
you're making it less, right? So that was a challenge. And I just said to myself, what if I could kind of flip it on its head and consult artists? They can jump in and out with me as they want. And there's really no pressure. I'm not really like babysitting them. And they can kind of keep it moving. We can jump in for hour blocks, half-hour blocks, 2-hour blocks, monthly, weekly, whatever. And, it's more like a product manager. So I've really been focused on that. And then other opportunities came about over the years. I was consulting with my buddy during the pandemic, Michael Chase at Metropolitan Groove Merchants. They're an Australian distributor. They were looking for some help on like the hip hop side of things. So worked with them on that for about a year. Then worked with Billy Mann's company, Icons and Giants. It was a new label inside of Warner Music Group. They were looking for someone that knew sort of the Warner system, little A&R, little marketing. Worked with Grammy winner Double A. Worked with Kato on the track. We had this girl MNCR who we got upstream to Warner International. And then I worked with her. We went to Germany with her for Reaper Bond, so that was fun. Yeah, we got Mina, Italy, Germany, all those territories to pick her up, and the U.S. So that was fun. And then simultaneously, I was working for a Swedish record label called Nine Tone. I was the first U.S. A&R hired there, where I signed 33 artists. Um, so yeah, they had like a tech kind of platform. So it was a lot of like providing insight. Because when I was at Warner, I was on the team that acquired the Sodatone A&R research platform, and before that, I had built out like a A&R tracker that the Warner Brothers Records A&R team acquired. So have a lot of experience on like the research A&R side. So I was doing that with the Swedish label, and then yeah, that ended after 2 years there with my contract, and then I went over to Groover, which is a music promo company, and I'm leading their coaching business. So it was like kind of full circle. Doing a lot of coaching on my own, and I was able to kind of find a lane for it.
Amazing. So,
Yeah.
kind of, what are some of the services that you offer under the company? How are you able to work with established artists as well as those that are kind of new and growing?
Yeah, we're across the board, all budgets. I have like my half hour, hourly rates. I've done like retainer rates. Really depends. We're pretty nimble. Depending on the level of the artist, I understand that their budgets aren't huge, right? So to have access to someone like me, of course is gonna dictate some value, right? So you have to like figure out a budget, but then on top of that, I understand that like if you're hiring out third parties and stuff, radio promotion, publicists, those kind of things, there has to be some budget flexibility to tap into them as well.
So what are some of the stuff that you provide, an artist that might be retaining you? How does that work?
Yeah, it's a lot of relationships, building teams, getting under the hood with songs, maybe finding mixers, mastering engineers, producers. It's hard to quantify what A&R is. It's like artist relations, it's artist and repertoire. So a lot of people don't really understand it also because it's a bit subjective in the sense that like if I do A, B, and C, it's not going to guarantee that you get signed to a record label and have a hit song. But it will most likely make your music
But if you
better.
don't do those things, you're definitely not, that's never going to happen, right?
Yeah. So it's really like teaching them the process of like what it takes and also having that other perspective where it's like as an A&R, I know what an A&R is going to be looking for. So I can kind of make a threshold for them and say like, hey, you need to get up to these monthly listeners or you need this many followers or you need to average these many views, with each post and those kind of things.
So let's talk about that a little bit,
Yeah.
kind of like you said, working as a major A&R, what do you look for and how has kind of the role changed over time, right? I think we can think about the A&R at the back of the nightclub, the Whiskey A
Right.
Go-Go, like I'm going to sign you. And it's like, hey, newsflash, that's not how it works. Definitely hasn't worked for a while like that. But,
Yeah.
so how does it kind of work and where do you kind of fit in?
Yeah, it's been interesting. I mean, I would say when I was doing A&R at Warner, it was 2008 to 18. So that was probably at the height of like the blog era, I would say. And for that, like I was always just combing blogs, right? We had our key
Yeah.
ones that we look for, kind of your editors and writers, you
Two
knew their
Dope
taste.
Boys,
Yeah, Passion of the
Bob
Weiss, Not
VX.
Right,
Yeah.
Vice, Noisy, all
Yeah.
those. And for me, it was more about positioning at that time. Like I knew if an artist maybe had a quirkiness to them, it might be more like Noisy, right? Or Passion of the Weiss or something like that. And I got to know the editors, got to know their taste. And a lot of it was visuals driven. Like that was a big part of why I was leaving the music video side of things at the majors, because I just saw like, the days of, I mean, it still goes on, your red cameras and those big budgets were just dropping.
Yeah,
Like,
it's not necessary, right?
wasn't
MTV didn't
necessary.
dictate things anymore.
No, and like, there were amazing like videographers like that could just run and gun. DSLR cameras, weren't that expensive. And then YouTube obviously, came to prominence. So that was like 2008, 2009. And then it was very influential for the bloggers, right? Because in order to get featured, the editors would write something amazing. They actually had taste. It wasn't like a cut and paste job or an AI job. They actually had taste and would write about things. But then the visual component of it was so important to get on the blog. So yeah, that was a big part of like hunting artists. And I think getting in as early as you could. I remember like as soon as an artist was up on like Two Dope Boys or Not Right, and I really liked them, I'd email them right away, find the manager, find the artist, hit them up. And it felt like there was a bit of loyalty at that point too, where the artist really like messed with you if you were like the first A&R to hit you up. Like there was a bit of a loyalty aspect there. So a lot of it back then was like in some ways like the way I built out like a little research department using interns at Warner Music Group. And it was like combing through certain blogs, like you said, highlighting certain editors, writers. So there was like an influencer marketing thing on it before it was like really influencer marketing. It was like highlighting and finding tastemakers that were always like really early with artists or like certain brands that always supported artists and like follow them and figure out like who they were posting and reach out to them and talk to them. And then I helped build this dashboard that Warner Brothers Records ended up acquiring. And it was like an A&R tracker. So yeah, that was how I was doing A&R back then. There was still a live component attached to it. Like I was going to see bands and like there was still value there, like being at the show, meeting them behind the scenes and stuff. But you definitely saw like the transition. I think I was at one of the most interesting times of A&R where it was a bit old school, where you had to still go see acts, but the digital wave was coming where you were following like writers, producers, videographers, tastemakers, and then yeah, and then I was on the team that acquired the Sodatone platform, and that was really like looking at more velocity and like Spotify and different
Shazam,
metrics.
right? How many people, like, that's a huge metric that people
Yeah,
don't get. Like, if someone wants to whip out their phone to know what song that is, that's like someone that's interested enough in the song to care what the song is.
totally. Yeah, no, that was huge. So yeah, Shazam was big. Um, but yeah, it was transitioning then. I would say like 2015, I felt like at Warner, like there was a lot of confusion on like what Spotify is and was.
Hmm.
We were allowed to sign a lot of artists. We went on like this signing spree.
Because of
But
the
there,
numbers there.
yeah, but there wasn't any marketing attached to it, and it was really frustrating for artists that were signed just like before it, because there was a couple of regime changes that happened where they were like, "Hey, like this record's done. Like, where's the marketing for it?" And it was like,
Hmm.
"No, they're just gonna like throw it against the wall and see what sticks."
Hmm.
So there was a lot of like clashes there between even internally A&R with marketing teams and stuff. And then it got weird where we had like a signing freeze, but each A&R was allowed to do a couple demo deals. So we got like $2,500. And when I worked with Seymour Stein, he got one, I got one, and I ended up signing this girl, Samantha Fish, who is an amazing blues artist. My buddy Bobby Harlow and I like revamped her entire look. Like what you see now is what she is. He produced the record. We turned in like 3 or 4 records. Warner passed on it. They had 90 days. I'm sure you know about the demo deals, right? 90 days, they passed on it. The songs reverted back to her. My friend Bobby ended up continuing on, made her record, and it ended up debuting on the Billboard charts, Chills and Fevers record. And then she got signed to Concord after that. So, yeah.
So always on the pulse of what's next, right? That's kind of what, that's how you do it.
Yeah, it's a little bit of gut, a little bit of data. I mean, I still think the gut weighs in pretty heavily. Um, Even though I was like early on A&R research stuff and at Warner believed in that, even with Sodatone, like it was a very intuitive platform. Like it would highlight artists that, were for sure like successful. Like I remember, Mountjoy and these other artists turning up on there. Louis Capaldi, I found very early on there. But you still had to get superiors to buy in, on the track and want to sign it. So there was still that balance of the gut versus the data, no matter what. So just because it was trending and up there, it might not appeal to someone that you're pitching it to.
How do you acquire potential clients? Is it referral? Is it networking? Is it kind of combination of both?
Yeah, it's a combination of both. I think I've been lucky because of my reputation that's out there. I've been able to really lean in on projects that I've done, A&R previously, my credits, my relationships. So a lot of it's through my website, through LinkedIn. I'm on a bunch of different platforms like Exposure Music and Groover, even Groover. Before I started working at Groover in like 2018 or 19, they had reached out to me to be a curator. So I started there. Yeah, and then a lot of it is just referrals and friends like thinking of me, or they come across an artist that needs some help on either marketing or A&R. Yeah,
What kind of genres do you work in?
all genres. I mean, at Warner it was more pop, hip hop, and rock. But I've done a lot of international stuff too, like electronic music. I'll dabble in.
So how are you able to kind of take your experiences working at, major labels and now kind of apply it to the work that you're doing now?
I don't think it's really any different, right? The only difference is I don't have an expense account anymore. That was probably the best part of, working at a major and working with Seymour Stein. I mean, that was like a once in a lifetime opportunity to, spend time with him and pick his brain and just hear his stories and stuff. But outside of that, I mean, the only difference really between an unsigned artist and a signed artist, in my opinion, unsigned artists have all the time in the world, but they don't have a budget. And signed artists have a budget or access to it. Doesn't mean they always get it, but it's sort of there for them. But they don't have a lot of time because if they aren't like delivering a successful record, they're going to get dropped. but it's all the stuff in the middle, right? You have to tour, you have to make great music, you have to post on socials, maybe merch. If you're not doing
I
that
do
stuff in the,
interviews, press, like engage with
yeah,
the people.
yeah, and if you're not catering really direct to fan, regardless, if you're not doing that and having success, you're not going to get signed. And if you're signed and you're not doing that, you're going to get dropped. So
Mhm.
it's all that stuff in the middle that needs to get done. That's the work. That's really, where I can come in and help because I've seen it, I've done it, and I've got my hands dirty, doing it.
So what kind of, mistakes or learnings have you kind of, encountered on the way, and how have you kind of, been able to shift or grow through that?
Great question. I mean, I would say when I was first getting into A&R, sitting in those A&R meetings could be a little intimidating. I was in there with like Leo Cohen and Rob Cavallo and Seymour Stein and stuff like that. And I think a, a lot of those people have nothing to lose really. Like they could kind of say whatever they want in those meetings. When I played like Ho Hey, right, as an example for the Lumineers, when people told me no, I probably in retrospect should have just said like, fuck you guys, you're crazy. I believe in this. Um, I didn't realize that at the time. I was afraid they'd be like, get the fuck out of here, So, but it really is like having the courage of like your own conviction, and really believing in it. So I think that's probably one thing I learned in retrospect is just like really standing firm no matter what. Um, Outside of that, I think it's really just like you got to work hard, right? I mean, you have to, and it's all about helping artists. I think that's really what it is for me. It's like helping artists. That's one thing I learned that whether they're again signed to a major or unsigned, they need the help. And they also really like don't know a lot.
Yeah.
So I think that's what I've
They don't
learned.
know what they don't know at all.
Right. So it's just being a resource to them and kind of like giving them the information. Because I think that's sort of the problem with the business is like everyone in those seats are sort of afraid to share the knowledge, it seems like.
Yeah.
I even remember maybe that's how I built some of my reputation. Um, I would answer like emails all the time. And I know a lot of people like don't even respond to emails. I mean, people I'm friends with in the industry, if I'll reach out to them, sometimes they don't answer you back. So it's like, it's a really strange business. And I've just always believed in, being friendly and respectful and courteous. And I think maybe I got that from Seymour Stein. I don't know because I think back to like, he answered my email, and here's a guy who's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Like, why can't anyone else do that, right? And just have a
Right. That's the way I look at it sometimes. Like I would, I deal with a lot of students, I do a lot of lectures, and it's like, hey, like it's worth reaching out. Like you
yeah,
sent that email. What was the worst this person's gonna do? Click delete. Like he's not gonna email you. How dare you email me? I am Seymour Son, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame member. Like like that's not going to be happening. And if
yeah,
they do, you dodged a bullet, right? Like you dodged a bullet if that's the way someone's going to react to
true,
you,
yeah,
and that's kind of why I always kind of go back to Nike slogan. It's like, just do it, right?
yeah,
Like I wanted this opportunity. I saw an angle and I just did it. I just took the shot and clearly it worked out to, put you where you are now.
yeah, yeah. It was a yeah, and I think back in the day too, when I'd be in like elevators with people and stuff, and like probably when I was younger, I'd be like scared, to say a word, but as I got more comfortable and confident and was in my role, I would like introduce myself to people and use it as networking and stuff. Like I remember I was in A3C and was in the elevator with the Alchemist, and like I just started talking to him. I was like, "Yo, what's up, man? Like, I have an ASR 10, just like you have and stuff." And
Mhm.
his guard kind of came down. I was like, "Hey, I do A&R at Warner." And I had worked with this guy Dante Ross, who's like an amazing A&R. And I was like, I know you know Dante and stuff like that. And we just started talking then. His guard kind of came down because I mentioned people he knew. And I was like mentioning a very technical like piece of equipment that he used and stuff. And, the people are people, right? So we
Exactly.
just had a chat and it was cool. But maybe if this was, another time, I might not have just said, what's up to Alchemist. But
Right, you would have just been like looking in the corner
yeah,
and
just
then
kind of like
talked
standing
about, oh,
there.
I wish I would have said this.
Yeah, so no regrets, right? I think that's a big part of it. Like, if you're in that situation, right place, right time, it's luck meets talent and opportunity. Just, take your shot and just be respectful.
Exactly. I had a fun, interesting interaction with like Jason Pierre-Paul, like when he
Oh,
was on
really?
the Giants like that, where it was just like right place, right time, just introduce myself, get in there, and you know, it was cool.
Yeah.
So what are common mistakes that talent make when they're maybe engaging or working with a label? Maybe what they don't understand how that relationship works or what they should look out for.
I think sometimes it's like they want to just be signed to a label and they probably get signed too early. I think that's the biggest challenge. It always felt to me with a lot of maybe artists that I worked with that maybe didn't have success or got dropped or something. It wasn't hard to get like the advance money to make the records. And that's a great time when all the artists are like super excited. Yeah, we're going in the studio, we're making a record, we got a budget. Once that record's delivered, that's like the hardest time for an A&R, for an artist, because you have to like excite the building, and get people to really like buy in. But also you have to have stuff going on, like momentum to put out the record. And I think that's a challenge sometimes. It's changed now because it's not so much album driven, but when I was at Warner, I still made some, full albums and stuff. So any momentum usually that an artist had, then they'd get signed and then the momentum would start
Because
dropping
they were just working on the
because they're
album.
working on the record. Yeah, so that's the hardest thing. But I think a lot of artists like, and it makes sense, right? Because like it's always been like in sports, right? You want to play for the Yankees or go to the pros, and it's like that credibility thing. If you get signed to a label, like you made it. But really, like once you get signed, that's just the day the work starts. I mean,
Exactly.
and that's the hardest thing I think for artists to understand. They think that a label just has like this magic bullet that's going to take them to the top, and it's further from the truth. I mean, usually the manager, the artist, the A&R, maybe if you're lucky, your product manager is like kind of cool and will work on some stuff with you, but they're the ones that are like building up and creating the waves to get the rest of the building excited.
Right. And like you said, it's something that artists don't necessarily realize that it's not the label that's going to make you famous or get stuff going. It's your internal team. It's the publicist. It's the
Yeah.
marketing agency, the consulting, the people that are going to move the record. And then the label will just kind of jump on as the train is already moving, right? Like
Yeah,
that's
put
kind of
some
what the
investment.
analytics show now, that like you're already a speeding bullet. So we're just going to jump on, and like you said, that added weight and credibility of a Warner or a Sony is gonna make that train go faster,
Mhm.
right? More weight, we're gonna go, rocket ship it. But
Yeah,
you have to
amplify.
be on that rocket ship for us to jump on.
Totally. Yeah, and that's the hardest thing for artists to understand. They just think like, oh, they could do it all. They'll do it all for me. But you got to excite them to actually work on your project. So that's the challenge.
And we know what that means, making them money, right?
Making
Like
money,
doing it
yeah.
on your own to where it's like, okay, well, you're successful enough that it makes sense for us to divert our resources to make you more successful.
Yeah. And the other side of it too is sort of that, right? It's like exactly that. They're investing in the artist, with the advance and stuff. And I think a lot of times artists don't realize that like a label is fronting the bill, right? I mean, if you went and got a loan at a bank, you owe that money back and there's
Paying them
interest.
every month,
You're paying them every month. And if you're not paying, they're knocking on your door. The creditors are coming,
insurance is
right?
going up,
Everything's
interest is going up. Exactly.
everything's going up. But at a label, like it's just a write-off, right? If you are not successful, yeah, maybe those 10 songs that you agreed to, the label keeps and shelves and holds on to. Even though I've actually never found that to happen with every artist that I worked
If
with.
their songs are worth, what does it matter? If they're no
It doesn't
value,
matter.
it doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
The 9 times out of 10, I would say the label gave the records back to the artist and, fronted the bill and, we're in the hole. So
Yeah.
the labels really aren't that bad. It's just, they're not robbing you. Yeah, maybe they take 85%, but also they're putting in, the 100K or 50, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So they're fronting that risk. So I think it's the education. A lot of artists don't understand that. And, just having that perspective and being able to like articulate it to them has been really cool too with what I do.
Right. It's like a loan that you don't have to pay back. Like, where
Yeah.
does that exist?
Right. So, if you're in a position where you are ready for a label, then, it makes sense. But if not, there's going to be a lot of challenges.
So, what do you have advice for people that are maybe trying to kind of follow your path, work on the AR and the music business side of the industry?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough business for sure. I think, as you can see just with my journey, there isn't a direct career path. It definitely, some people are lucky and they stay on one trajectory and have the success. But I think for me, it's like my major was interdisciplinary studies, right? So I'm very interested in all different parts of the business. And, I think for people coming up, um, it probably makes more sense to just start as soon as you can. Like I wouldn't say it's a regret, but those 4 years when you're in college are almost like a safe haven, and if you can start something then, and then when you come out of school, now you've had 4 years of experience, or you have a couple of artists that you manage, or one maybe blew up, labels or wherever in the music business, there'll be a door for you. So I think that's the thing. Start as early as you can because the time actually goes really fast, which is insane, but it's true. So yeah, start as soon as you can. I would say also if you really want to maybe do A&R or work at a label, work with the artists. I think as long as you're like close to the artists, you'll always some way, shape, or form have a job because they need the help and
Right?
they're the
That's what I
ones
always say.
doing
It's like
it.
when you work at agencies, management places, like you got to develop relationships with the talent themselves and
Yeah,
be like, oh, Justin works here. Okay, he's my guy. I trust Justin. I'm
yeah.
going with Justin.
Yeah, because it's exactly that. It really is a trust thing, whether it's an artist with a particular A&R person, manager, agent, or even as an A&R, right? It's like the bosses of those companies, like you'll see a lot of like teams move around together, right? And it's because maybe they just know what they're going to get with their team and their trust. There's trust there with taste and the way they work with artists and stuff, so they know what they're going to get. So it's all trust and all taste.
And I think that's great advice for everyone out there. And I kind of feel like it's really overlooked that, like, when you're in college during these years, internships get credit, but do whatever you can because not only are you building this resume, and you're also building this network. The people you're working with and working for, maybe you might not work there, but they might know somewhere and somewhere else that it's like, oh, Eric worked with me. He was great this summer. Check him out. And that's what matters in the industry at
Yeah.
that level, right? Like someone be like, oh, he spent the summer here. He was great. He was really helpful. You should talk to him. And that is invaluable.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much every job that I've, got for the most part was through a referral, give or take.
And that's how these industries work because like you
Yeah.
said, it's a trust thing, it's understanding. It's like if I'm going to send you someone, it's because like I know what they're capable of and what you need and there's a fit.
Yep. Exactly.
So what's kind of some of your most memorable highlights to date? It sounds like it's, stuff that always kind of like sticks out to you.
Yeah, there's a bunch for sure. Obviously, again, working with Seymour was like the top of the, mountain.
Hmm.
But Delta Ray, they were my first like official signing.
Hmm.
So they're a band that have been doing it for 10 plus years. We put out like 3 or 4 records with them through Warner. Then they left, they went to Big Machine, got shelved there actually, and they're so smart. They launched a Kickstarter that raised $500,000. It was the fifth largest Kickstarter in the history of Kickstarter. So, they were able to capitalize on the Taylor Swift like Masters debacle.
I
And the
bet.
Swifties kind of came to their aid, and they were able to kind of navigate that and did some independent stuff. But really active band. Really proud of them. They all have like families and houses now and stuff, and they're like the sweetest group of people as well. So working with them was a highlight for sure. De Niro Ferrar, a rapper that I had signed from Charlotte, North Carolina. Um, Probably spent the most time with him. So, have really fond, vivid memories of going to South by with him and hanging out and kind of like he was interesting because he had a lot of different managers. So I remember at one point Seymour actually thought I was managing him, but I just said to Seymour, you had Ice T, right? And you really believed in him. If I believe in an artist, I want to be there with them and work with them and help them. So yeah, with De Niro, he was really fun. Was very early on Denzel Curry. I was managing a rapper out of Miami named Kashi, and Kashi kind of came up with like Young Simi and Rob Banks and all these guys, and they were doing shows, and Denzel was on the bill. So got to know Denzel and his manager Mark really early on, and then De Niro and him did a song called Bow Down, which actually turned into a 20-date US tour, the Bow Down tour. And then Denzel got signed not long after that to Loma Vista Records. Um, what else? De Niro really found the baby. So he took him under his wing, and we had the baby at South by Southwest one year when he was known as Big Baby Jesus. He stayed in my hotel room, and like, you could just tell he was a star. So they had a song together called The Dealer, which was, I guess, technically his first major label placement, as well as Denzel's. Like, me and De Niro gave that to him, which was cool. Um, yeah, what else? I mean, the Soda Tone stuff was fun on the A&R research side because it felt like there wasn't really any other label out there. Universal, obviously, so big, and Sony, but not really a dashboard or platform that was really publicized that was acquired. So I was on that team. And then I would say the Lottery Winners, they were a really fun band that are still having success now, A&Ring their first debut record, debuting top 25. And yeah, they're a really fun, quirky, like charismatic band and just great people. And with them, I was able to go to Rockfield Studios in Wales, and that's where like Bohemian Rhapsody was recorded. I got to go in the echo chambers, and Wonderwall by Oasis was written there and produced there and stuff. So yeah, having those experiences of just like being around great people, being mentored by some awesome people. My friend Kate Hyman, who does, she signed like Moby and Granddaddy, and Dante Ross was an amazing like friend and mentor when I was there. So yeah, Warner was a really great like kind of platform I felt for me to like be around these great people, and they trusted me, and I got to interact with them and make great records and work with great bands and kind of travel the world.
Amazing. Well, it sounds like you definitely have some really great stuff. So bring us all together. What's the future for you and for the company?
Yeah, just continuing on the path of working with great artists, finding cool partnerships, I think. I've been really enjoying like consulting for other companies, like tech companies and stuff like that. I've always kind of been a resource to like chairmans, label heads, founders. So I think that's really been fun for me is like interacting with them, advising them, giving them strategy, providing like outlook for the business. So hopefully more clients like that, more great artists. Maybe an artist will, chart on the Billboard charts or win a Grammy or something. Who knows? That's the goal.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This was great. So where can everyone, connect with you and learn more about, what you're working on?
Yeah, so I'm at Eric McLellan, EricMcLellan on Instagram. Yo Peep This on Instagram as well. At the end, there's an underscore. And my email's, out there as well. You can go on the site www.yopeepthis.com. Hit me up on the contacts, and I'm around.
Well, thanks everybody again for tuning in, and make sure you peep this and check everything out that Eric's working on. And thanks to our sponsor again, Vouch. So check them out and use my affiliate code listed in the video description. And make sure to follow me on all social media platforms, Justin J ESQ, for all our past episodes.
Thanks, Justin. Appreciate it, man. And props to Vouch as well. And appreciate you guys.